Rich millionaire brings mistress home and replaces his wife. Now he's desperate to get her back. Anthony Lancaster had it all: wealth, power, and a beautiful wife who stood by him through every triumph and setback. But when he brought his mistress home, replacing the woman who had built his empire by his side, he thought he was trading old love for new passion. He believed he had made the ultimate power move. What he didn't realize was that he wasn't just losing a wife, he was losing the one person who truly knew him. And when the world he so carefully crafted begins to unravel, he finds himself desperate for something money can't buy: a second chance. But some betrayals are unforgivable. And sometimes the one you push away is the one you'll regret losing forever. Stay with me, because this is a story of love, betrayal, and a fall from grace that no one saw coming. Anthony Lancaster was known throughout the bustling city of Lexington Heights as the epitome of success and affluence. He had come from humble beginnings, building his empire of luxury hotels, high-rise condominiums, and upscale restaurants one painstaking step at a time. For the last decade, Anthony had stood at the pinnacle of achievement, gracing the covers of business magazines and rubbing shoulders with billionaires, once even sharing a private lunch with Bill Gates in Seattle to discuss potential philanthropic ventures. Yet behind the glittering facade was a man whose personal life was rapidly unraveling. At the center of his world was his wife, Sophia Lancaster, an elegant, poised woman who had supported him from the day he decided to open his first boutique hotel. At one point, their love seemed unbreakable, forged in the flames of adversity when they'd had barely enough money to pay rent. But power, wealth, and temptations had corroded Anthony's convictions. He found himself entranced by the allure of a younger woman, Carla Moreno, whose intoxicating presence upended everything he cherished. The story of how Anthony Lancaster brought his mistress home, effectively displacing his wife, only to realize his devastating mistake too late, reverberates through the social circles of Lexington Heights to this day. While few know the full account, whispers of betrayal, cunning manipulation, and heartbreak ripple across the corridors of high society. This is a tale not just of romance gone awry, but of redemption sought in the unlikeliest of places. What follows is the complete, unvarnished story of how Anthony's world, and everyone within it, changed forever. Anthony Lancaster had everything money could buy: a lavish mansion in Lexington Heights, holiday villas in the south of France, and an impressive collection of sports cars that seemed to grow larger every year. He also shared a long-standing marriage with Sophia, an inseparable partnership that had survived countless trials. However, with success came new stresses, an ever-expanding schedule of business travels and invitations to elite events where beautiful, charismatic people hovered like moths around the flame of his wealth and influence. It was at one such event, a late-night fundraiser hosted at the Palomino Hotel in Miami, that Anthony first encountered Carla Moreno. She was a rising star in the modeling world, sporting a sky-blue evening gown that clung to her slender frame. He'd just finished speaking with an old friend, Viktor Morozov, an investor who had introduced him once to Elon Musk in a private pitch meeting, and was making his way back to the bar when he noticed Carla standing alone. She sipped a glass of champagne, her dark eyes scanning the crowd with a bored expression. Something in the way she carried herself drew Anthony in. Perhaps it was the mixture of vulnerability and intense confidence. Sophia was in Lexington Heights that weekend, busy with a charity event of her own, so Anthony found himself drifting over to the mysterious woman by the bar. He struck up a conversation, offering to buy her a drink, and she responded with a knowing smile. Carla's father, a minor European aristocrat from Spain, had apparently lost his fortune years ago. Carla told the story with a detached calm that hinted at private pain. She had come to America hoping to find opportunity and success in modeling. "And maybe," she'd said, swirling her champagne, "someone who can help me navigate these dangerous waters." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to Anthony's, and in that moment he felt a shiver of forbidden intrigue course through him. Sophia had always been the center of his universe, but here, amid the flickering lights of the fundraiser, was someone who seemed like a mirror of his own ambitions, hungry, cunning, and yearning for more than what life had dealt her. Over the next few weeks, Carla became an unspoken fixture in his private hours. Anthony would fly her out to remote locations under the guise of business and arrange exclusive photo shoots through his PR connections. There was an electric thrill in their clandestine meetings, stolen touches in secluded corners, whispered phone calls in the dead of night, and illicit text messages that made his heart race like a teenager's. Sophia, ever trusting, believed Anthony's increased travel schedule was due to his escalating business empire. She was the charitable soul, spending her time organizing fundraisers, volunteering at local shelters, and writing heartfelt letters to potential donors for her philanthropic causes. The deception weighed heavily on Anthony at first. He would lie awake next to his unsuspecting wife, torn by guilt, questioning whether his life had gone off track. But inevitably, in the harsh light of day, Carla's magnetism drew him back. He justified it to himself, rationalizing that everyone in my position has these temptations. Months slipped by in this manner, each new day weaving a thread of secrecy into the tapestry of his once honest life. Carla demanded more of his time, more of his resources, and more of his emotional commitment. Soon it wasn't enough for them to meet in hidden locales. She wanted recognition, to be seen in public with him, to stand by his side. Anthony found himself torn between the stability and love of Sophia and the intense burning spark Carla ignited. Then came a moment that would change it all. One evening, Sophia returned from a friend's baby shower to find Anthony pacing anxiously in the living room. He had insisted she come home early, and his unusual urgent tone over the phone left her nerves on edge. When she walked in, she noticed he looked pale, like he hadn't slept in days. The entire house seemed to hum with unspoken tension. Before Sophia could even set down her purse, he said, "We need to talk." They took a seat in the formal living room. Anthony cleared his throat. He had planned a carefully worded confession, something that would minimize the damage, but the truth, once it began to spill, possessed a momentum of its own. He admitted he had been seeing Carla Moreno for several months, that Carla had become someone important to him. The color drained from Sophia's face as he spoke, and she struggled to keep her composure. How could you do this?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best attempt at steadiness. Anthony mumbled something about their emotional distance, about how he felt neglected while she focused on charities. It was a cheap excuse, and they both knew it. The flicker of heartbreak in Sophia's eyes told him he had crossed an unforgivable line. Yet, rather than beg for forgiveness and promise to end the affair, Anthony made the catastrophic decision to double down. He confessed that Carla was planning to move to Lexington Heights, and that he wanted her near him, no matter the cost. Sophia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Outraged and devastated, she demanded he break off contact with Carla immediately, but to her growing horror, Anthony refused. He insisted he cared for Carla and wasn't willing to end it. A sickening realization washed over Sophia. Her husband wasn't just having an affair. He was thinking about rewriting their life entirely. Through tears, Sophia gave an ultimatum. "Either you end it with Carla and commit to counseling with me, or we're done." Anthony responded with a cold confidence that took her breath away. "I can't lose Carla," he said, his voice raw. "I want you to stay, Sophia, but things can't go back to how they were. If you can't accept this arrangement, I don't know what to tell you." She stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest, the reality of betrayal ripping through her. Never had she dreamed that the boy who once vowed everlasting love would stand before her and propose such a twisted scenario. A sob choked out of her throat, and she fled up the stairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her, where she cried until dawn. 3 days later, Sophia packed her essentials and left for her sister's home in Chicago. She refused to speak to Anthony, refusing even to answer his phone calls or messages. A single text came through from him on the day she left. "I'm sorry, but I need you to understand. Please don't do anything rash. I still love you." She deleted it without reply. Anthony, consumed by both guilt and defiance, told himself he was only following his heart. Or at least that's what Carla had whispered into his ear, insisting he deserved to be with someone who made him feel alive again. Determined to prove his love for Carla was more than a fleeting affair, he orchestrated her move to Lexington Heights, installing her in a luxurious penthouse downtown. Sophia was gone, and Anthony convinced himself he had taken the correct path, diving headlong into the web of Carla's charms. He didn't fully grasp it then, but in that moment he had set fire to a vow once cherished above all else. Weeks turned into months. Carla Moreno's arrival in Lexington Heights was anything but subtle. Anthony's PR team managed to keep gossip columns at bay for a time, but rumors began to spread that a mysterious woman, young, foreign, and impossibly beautiful, had captured the heart of one of the city's wealthiest men. Even the staff in Anthony's mansion whispered about Carla's presence in hushed tones, glancing nervously around corners. Carla quickly embedded herself in Anthony's lifestyle. She accompanied him to glitzy galas, stepping out of limousines in designer dresses that Anthony paid for with a single swipe of his platinum credit card. She redecorated the penthouse to her liking, bringing in modern art and plush furnishings. She convinced Anthony to purchase a thoroughbred horse she'd admired at a charity auction in California, a sleek chestnut stallion named King's Ransom. "It's an investment," she purred, stroking the horse's mane, while Anthony watched with a mixture of apprehension and fascination. Meanwhile, the mansion that Sophia had once called home felt emptier by the day. Anthony couldn't bear to sleep in the master bedroom alone, so he retreated to a smaller guest suite, telling himself it was more comfortable. In truth, he couldn't face the haunting memories of Sophia's lingering fragrance in the master bedroom, nor the ghost of what their marriage had been. Guilt weighed heavily on him each night, even as he sent Carla playful texts and arranged for weekend getaways in exotic locales. Some nights, Anthony found himself standing alone in the living room, glass of whiskey in hand, staring at the grand piano Sophia used to play. She had a remarkable ear for music, and often spent her evenings composing short melodies, filling the cavernous mansion with warmth. Now the piano's lid collected dust, and the halls seemed to echo with a hollow hush. Carla, sensing Anthony's bouts of remorse, sought to distract him with lavish parties and social engagements. She introduced him to her circle of fashionable friends, artists, models, and influencers who thrived on the adrenaline of high society. Gatherings in Carla's penthouse became legendary, free-flowing champagne, imported delicacies, DJs flown in from Ibiza, and a guest list curated to include only the most glamorous individuals. Anthony would often find himself cornered by these socialites, who flattered him with compliments and flirtations as though he were the center of the universe. In the midst of these parties, Anthony would catch glimpses of Carla across the room, laughing easily with her new admirers. She moved effortlessly between them, her eyes alight with mischief, controlling the atmosphere as though she were the queen of some decadent court. It was a far cry from Sophia's quiet confidence and philanthropic heart. But as the days turned into a blur of opulence, Anthony began to notice subtle changes in Carla's demeanor. She became more demanding. Where once she had asked politely for modest help, like introducing her to photographers or setting up small modeling gigs, she now demanded the best agencies, the biggest runways, and the most exclusive endorsements. She insisted on attending every high-profile event Anthony was invited to, eventually overshadowing even his presence. Some of Anthony's business associates began asking, half-jokingly, if Carla was now running the show. Worse still, Carla seemed to become bored with Anthony's bouts of seriousness. When he lamented his guilt over Sophia, Carla would roll her eyes. "She left you, didn't she?" The door was always open for her to return, and she chose to walk away, she'd say dismissively, lighting a cigarette, despite Anthony's request that she not smoke indoors. "You belong to me now. You made your choice." Her words, so callous, stoked a small ember of resentment in Anthony. He bristled at her lack of empathy and her quickness to dismiss Sophia's heartbreak. A storm brewed within him, but every time he thought of confronting Carla, he recalled how much he'd already invested in their relationship, how many bridges he'd burned. He told himself it was too late to turn back. Pride, combined with shame, locked him into the life he had created. For a time, though, the facade held. The city's gossip columns printed stories about Anthony and Carla's whirlwind romance, sprinkled with sensational rumors about their lavish parties. Very few dared to ask directly about Sophia, either out of fear or courtesy, but her absence from Anthony's side was a glaring void. Anthony's own mother, Vanessa Lancaster, living in quiet retirement in a cottage by the sea, refused his calls, appalled by how he had treated Sophia. Some of Anthony's siblings also distanced themselves. In the new hush surrounding him, Anthony battled with the realization that the life he had wanted might no longer be the one he had ended up with. Far away from the sprawling mansion and the glossy parties, Sophia Lancaster found solace in the arms of her older sister, Melissa Park. Melissa's Chicago townhouse was modest but warm, filled with the aroma of home-cooked meals and the laughter of her two children, Jacob and Lily. Sophia tried to keep her composure for their sake, but nights brought floods of tears she could no longer hold back. Melissa did her best to console her sister, encouraging her to see a therapist and reminding her that she was not alone. Sophia spent her days in therapy sessions, penning emotional diary entries and attempting to rebuild her sense of self-worth. She also took on small contractual work with local charities, continuing her passion for helping others. In time, she developed a close friendship with one of her therapist's other clients, an older widow named Harriet Daniels, who facilitated group discussions for women going through divorce and betrayal. One day, Harriet organized a weekend retreat at a lakeside cabin in Michigan. Surrounded by a circle of women who had faced similar heartbreak, Sophia began to unearth her own resilience. The group practiced daily mindfulness, hiked through fall foliage, and shared vulnerable stories by a crackling fireplace. It was here that Sophia finally spoke the words she had been dreading. "I think my marriage is really over." As tears glistened on her cheeks, Harriet placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Your marriage might be over," she said softly, "but your life is just beginning." During the retreat, Sophia realized that her identity had long been entwined with Anthony's ambitions and successes. She had helped him build his empire, but in the process she'd buried her own dreams. The heartbreak of his betrayal was monumental, yes, but in that heartbreak a new door had opened, a chance for her to step into the spotlight of her own life. With renewed conviction, Sophia began crafting a plan. First, she wanted to revisit Lexington Heights to resolve the legal side of her separation, determine the distribution of assets, and clarify her future. She was no gold digger, but she refused to walk away from the life she had helped build with nothing. More importantly, she wanted to confront Anthony face to face, not for his sake, but for hers. She deserved closure, a final conversation that would let her bury the past and move forward. Yet as determined as she was, she could not quell the tremor of anxiety every time she thought of stepping foot in that grand mansion again. Memories of love, laughter, and eventually betrayal haunted her dreams. She would have to brace herself for seeing Anthony and possibly Carla in the home that she had nurtured for so many years. In a surprising twist, her old friend and legal advisor, Mark Beringer, reached out with an offer to help. He had once provided pro bono work for one of Sophia's charities and had always admired her unwavering dedication. On hearing about her troubles, Mark volunteered to guide her through the complexities of potential divorce proceedings. Sophia, initially hesitant, ultimately agreed. The support felt like a lifeline. 2 months after moving in with Melissa, Sophia steeled herself for a trip back to Lexington Heights. She would stay in a hotel, finalize her decisions with Mark, and decide once and for all the direction of her life. On a cold December afternoon, she boarded a train bound for the city that had once been her entire universe, unsure of what she might find. While Sophia was rediscovering her strength in Chicago, cracks were forming in Carla and Anthony's relationship in Lexington Heights. Carla's insatiable appetite for status and recognition led her to push Anthony harder and harder. She wanted him to buy her a sprawling estate rather than the penthouse. She wanted a new line of credit to support her budding fashion brand. She wanted a seat on the board of one of Anthony's companies, an outlandish demand that made even the loyal corporate attorney Jonathan Caldwell raise an eyebrow. Anthony, feeling the pressure, tried to appease her. He arranged meetings for her with top investors, introduced her to influential magazine editors, and showered her with expensive gifts. But the more he gave, the more Carla seemed to crave. Her nights out grew wilder, sometimes returning home well after dawn, with a gaggle of sycophants in tow. Anthony began receiving calls from enraged neighbors, complaining about the raucous parties at Carla's penthouse. When he confronted her, Carla laughed, calling him an old man for caring too much about what other people thought. Late one night, after a confrontation that ended with Carla storming out of the penthouse, Anthony decided to return to his mansion alone. He drifted through its silent corridors, recalling the last real conversation he had with Sophia here. Guilt washed over him like a tidal wave. He had driven away a woman who genuinely cared about him, who had supported him through every triumph and failure, and replaced her with a person who increasingly seemed more interested in his wallet than his heart. He wandered into the master bedroom, which he had largely avoided since Sophia's departure. He opened her closet, finding it still half filled with her belongings, vintage dresses, some formal gowns, even a pair of running shoes she loved. The faint smell of her perfume lingered on the clothes, and for a moment he felt her presence, like a comforting hand on his shoulder. A wave of regret and sorrow overcame him, and for the first time in years, Anthony Lancaster broke down, sobbing quietly into the empty room. In the days that followed, he tried to distance himself from Carla. He turned down some of her more outrageous spending requests and started missing events she insisted he attend. When Carla discovered he had secretly deposited a sum of money into a separate account, one that she had no control over, her anger was explosive. She accused him of no longer trusting her, of plotting to leave her for his precious Sophia. Their arguments escalated, and Carla made a dramatic display of packing her designer luggage, threatening to walk out for good if he wouldn't meet her demands. For a moment, Anthony almost wished she would walk out and never return. But pride, fear, and the lingering infatuation still held him back. He was too entangled in the web he had woven. The press, the city's elites, even his investors had grown used to Carla at his side. He dreaded the publicity nightmare that might ensue if Carla decided to publicly slander him, or worse, reveal the intimate details of their affair. He was exhausted by the constant drama, yet still he clung to the hope that he could somehow fix the mess he'd made. Meanwhile, a small part of him still yearned for Sophia, for her grace, her unwavering support, her tender smile. He knew she was no longer in the city, but every day he imagined what he would say if he could see her again. The heaviness of regret began to outweigh his fear of confronting the truth. Little did he know, Sophia Lancaster was already on her way back to Lexington Heights, ready to face him once more. Sophia arrived in Lexington Heights under a veil of winter clouds. Snow flurries dusted the city streets, adding a melancholic beauty to the place she used to call home. She checked into a modest suite at the Lancaster Grand, a luxury hotel Anthony had built early in his career, ironically named after himself. Feeling a pang of nostalgia as she passed the gilded lobby, she remembered the day the hotel first opened, how she and Anthony had stood side by side, greeting guests, both brimming with pride. Mark Beringer met her the next morning to discuss the path forward. Over coffee in the hotel's lounge, he explained her legal options, everything from reconciliation to a formal divorce. But as they talked, Sophia sensed a quiver in her heart. She had come here certain she wanted a divorce, yet the moment she set foot back in the city, old memories and emotions came flooding in. She needed clarity, a final conversation with Anthony to ascertain whether there was anything left worth saving. Mark arranged a meeting at the offices of Caldwell Associates, the law firm that also represented Anthony. The neutral territory seemed appropriate, a place of polished mahogany tables and quiet conference rooms, impersonal enough to keep tensions in check. On the day of the meeting, Sophia wore a simple black dress and a warm grey coat, appearing poised yet vulnerable. Her heart hammered in her chest when she saw Anthony waiting in the lobby. He stood up, eyes locking onto hers for the first time in months. She saw in his face an amalgam of regret, relief, and uncertainty. He looked thinner, with dark shadows under his eyes, as though he hadn't been sleeping well. Time had not been kind to either of them. "Hello, Sophia," he managed, voice wavering. She nodded in greeting, unsure if she trusted her voice to remain steady. Behind a conference table, flanked by Mark and Jonathan Caldwell, Anthony and Sophia took seats across from each other. No words were exchanged for a long moment, until Caldwell, in his measured tone, began outlining the agenda. A preliminary discussion about the marital assets, any spousal support, and the question of legal separation or divorce. "I'd like a private moment with my husband," Sophia said unexpectedly, voice quiet yet resolute. Caldwell hesitated, but eventually the lawyers stepped out into the corridor, leaving Anthony and Sophia alone. The silence between them crackled like static electricity. Finally, Anthony spoke. "Sophia," he said, eyes brimming with sorrow, I've missed you. I know that must sound ridiculous after everything I've done." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said softly. "I loved you, Anthony, more than anything, and it killed me when you brought her into our life." He exhaled, his body visibly trembling. "I know. I've made the biggest mistake of my life. Carla, she's not what I thought she was. Or maybe she is. But I was just too blind to see." Sophia's eyes glistened with tears. "I'm not here to offer you salvation," she said, carefully choosing her words. "I'm here to decide if there's anything left to fight for." His gaze fell to the table. "I've wanted to see you every day since you left. I kept hoping you'd call, that you'd show up at the door, but I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness." He paused, drawing a ragged breath. "I want you back, Sophia." The words hung in the air. He reached across the table for her hand, but she pulled away reflexively. She was not ready to be touched by him, not yet. "Everything's changed," she murmured. "You think a few apologies can erase the betrayal, the humiliation?" Anthony shook his head. "No, but I want a chance to earn back your trust. If you'd let me, I'll do anything." Sophia's heart pounded as she fought a tempest of emotions. She wanted to scream at him for his selfishness, for how easily he had dismissed her when Carla appeared. She wanted to hate him for throwing away their marriage. And yet, in the quiet corner of her soul, she recognized the sincerity of his remorse. "Do you still see Carla?" Sophia asked, her voice catching. "I've been trying to distance myself for weeks," he said, swallowing hard. "She won't go quietly, Sophia. She's threatened to sue me, blackmail me, everything, but I'm done with her. I promise." Despite herself, a spark of concern for Anthony flickered within her. It was the caretaker in her, the woman who had shared years of her life with him, that felt a pang of empathy. But she hadn't forgotten the searing pain of betrayal. She stared at the man she had once called her soulmate, wondering whether his desperation was real or if it was just fear of losing the comfortable stability she had provided. Outside the door, Mark and Caldwell waited. The clock ticked audibly in the quiet conference room. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice resonating with a newfound strength. "I won't make any promises," she said, "but I'll speak with you again. For now, let's keep this meeting to asset distribution. We'll revisit everything else later." Anthony's shoulders sagged, as though some heavy burden had temporarily lifted. He nodded, and a glimmer of hope flashed across his face. "Thank you," he whispered. She only nodded, pressing her lips together as she struggled to maintain composure. With that, she signalled for Mark and Caldwell to re-enter the room, each returning to their respective seats. In the chilly, formal atmosphere of the law firm, the process of dividing a life's worth of shared dreams began. But in the undercurrent, something else stirred, a hint of redemption perhaps, or an echo of a love that refused to be entirely silenced. Carla Moreno was not one to relinquish power quietly. When she learned of Sophia's return to Lexington Heights, and more importantly that Anthony was entertaining the possibility of reconciliation, a storm of jealousy and rage consumed her. She confronted Anthony one night in his penthouse, having tracked him down after he ignored her calls all evening. "So you're just done with me?" she spat, eyes flashing. She stood in the doorway, a glossy fur coat draped over her slender shoulders, her hair dishevelled from the night's windy snowfall. "I'm done with the lies," Anthony replied, weariness etched in his voice. "I want out, Carla. This isn't working." She scoffed, stepping forward. "Oh, you think you can just throw me away like an old toy now that your precious wife is back in town? Think again, Anthony." She lowered her voice, her words dripping venom. "If you try to cut me off, I'll make sure everyone hears about how you manipulated me, about all the money you funneled into my accounts to keep me quiet. I'll drag your name through every gossip column in the country." Anthony's temper flared. "Don't you dare pin this on me. You wanted this. You pushed for it. And don't pretend you care about me. You just care about my money." Carla's eyes narrowed into icy slits. For a moment, Anthony worried she might lash out physically, but she simply dropped her fur coat onto a nearby chair, marched up to him, and poked a manicured finger into his chest. "Don't you dare try to rewrite history. You chased me, Anthony. You said you wanted me in your life, that you'd do anything for me. And now that I've built a new life here, you want to take it all away?" Her lips curled in disdain. "You owe me." Before Anthony could respond, she brushed past him and sat down on the leather sofa, crossing her legs. "I want a settlement," she said, eyes locked on his. "Enough to maintain my lifestyle. Or else I go public." Anthony clenched his fists, rage mixing with shame. He sank into an armchair, burying his face in his hands. How had he let it get to this point? His empire, his family, his reputation, all were on the line. He looked up, steeling himself. "Fine," he said at last. "I'll have Caldwell draft something, but don't expect miracles." Carla's lip twitched in a half-smile. She grabbed her coat, stood up, and sauntered toward the door, casting a mocking glance over her shoulder. "I knew you'd see sense. You always have, darling." As her footsteps receded down the hallway, Anthony felt a wave of disgust wash over him. Disgust at Carla, yes, but mostly at himself. In a matter of months he had destroyed the life he'd built with Sophia. Now he was dancing on strings pulled by a woman who had no qualms about holding him hostage, emotionally and financially. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Sophia's number, heart pounding. He stared at it, longing to call, but he also knew it was too soon. How could he ask her for a second chance when he was still entangled in Carla's threats? After a sleepless night, Anthony met with Caldwell the next morning to discuss a potential settlement for Carla. Caldwell was wary, warning that a large payout might embolden her or lead to further demands. But Anthony couldn't see another way out. He needed Carla gone, for good, if he had any hope of making amends with Sophia or even preserving some shred of dignity. Behind the scenes, Sophia was finishing her last round of meetings with Mark. She had secured her share of the marital assets, enough to be comfortable and to continue her philanthropic work, even if she decided to relocate permanently to Chicago. The question remained, was she ready to close the door on Anthony forever? A swirl of conflicting emotions weighed on her as she walked through the city's wintry streets. She recalled Anthony's contrite expression at the law firm, the genuine sorrow in his eyes. Yet she also remembered every tear she shed, every humiliating moment when she realized she had been replaced by another woman. Mark, sensing her turmoil, advised her to take her time. "You don't have to decide now," he said, "but don't forget what led you to this point." That night, as a fresh snowfall coated the city, Sophia found herself standing outside the iron gates of the Lancaster mansion. She had come here almost on autopilot, drawn by memories and the need for closure. The gates were locked, the driveway empty. She stared through the bars at the large silhouette of the home she had once lovingly decorated, where she and Anthony used to plan their future together. A flood of emotion overcame her. She fought the urge to break down, to crumple in the snow. Instead, she turned away, determined to find her own path, with or without Anthony Lancaster. Days later, Sophia received an unexpected phone call. Anthony's voice quivered on the other end. "Sophia, it's me," he said, hesitating. "I've ended things with Carla, officially. Caldwell is working out details. She won't be part of our lives anymore." Sophia's heart pounded. The finality in his tone suggested a real change, though she remained cautious. "I'm not sure what you want me to say," she replied. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything," he continued, "but I want to see you, one last time, or maybe more if you're willing." Her silence spoke volumes. Memories of their life together collided with memories of her anguish. At length, she sighed. "Fine," she whispered, "but I make no promises." They met at a discreet restaurant outside Lexington Heights, where the glow of candlelight softened the tension between them. Anthony had arrived early, and when Sophia walked in, he stood to greet her, hands trembling. She noticed a vulnerability about him, a humility she hadn't seen in years. After ordering tea and coffee, they sat, an awkward quiet draping over them. Finally, Anthony spoke, his voice husky with emotion. "I'm sorry," he said, face etched with regret. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me, or even if you should, but I need you to know how deeply I regret everything." Sophia studied him, tears pooling in her eyes. "I don't think you understand how badly you hurt me. I trusted you with my life. You broke that trust in the cruelest way." He reached across the table haltingly, and this time she didn't pull away. His hand found hers, and she felt the warmth of his touch, a reminder of happier times. "I'm not asking for forgiveness all at once," he said quietly. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my days proving that to you, if you'll let me." For a moment, the world seemed to slow, as if fate itself paused to listen. Sophia searched his eyes for any trace of the arrogance and selfishness that had destroyed their marriage. Instead, she found a broken man, one who appeared sincere in his desire to make amends. She squeezed his hand gently. "Anthony," she began, "I don't know if I can ever love you the same way, but a part of me still cares for you, maybe always will." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I can't promise we'll be what we once were, but if you truly want to earn back my trust, we can try." Emotions flooded Anthony's face. Hope, relief, gratitude. In that small, intimate restaurant, they decided on the first step, a form of counseling, an honest dialogue that might help them pick up the shattered pieces. In the ensuing weeks, they attended couples therapy sessions, each bearing their vulnerabilities. Anthony opened up about feeling pressured by his success and seeking excitement in the wrong places. Sophia confessed how lonely she had felt, her identity swallowed by Anthony's vast ambition. They tread delicately, mindful that any chance at renewal required confronting the raw pain of betrayal. Carla Moreno, meanwhile, accepted a significant payout, severed her ties with Anthony, and vanished into the frenetic world of international travel and high society. Rumors placed her in Monaco or Dubai or the south of France, with a new companion each time. But Anthony no longer cared about her whereabouts. His focus had shifted entirely to saving the marriage he had nearly destroyed. The final scene of their reconciliation took place in the Lancaster mansion, a home tainted by sorrow, but still echoing with memories of genuine love. Sophia stood by the grand piano she had once adored, lightly touching its keys as Anthony watched from the doorway. "I haven't played in so long," she said, her voice trembling with nostalgia. Anthony walked over and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Play something," he urged softly. She gazed at him, her eyes filled with a tentative hope. Slowly, she sat down and began to play a simple melody, her fingers finding their way across the keys. The notes flowed, tentative at first, then gathering conviction, filling the cavernous space with a haunting beauty. Anthony closed his eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks, letting the music wash over him, a poignant reminder of the love they once shared. When the final chord faded, Sophia turned to Anthony, and he knelt before her, taking her hands into his. "I will spend every day proving I'm worthy of another chance," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "If you ever doubt me, tell me, and I'll do everything in my power to show you I've changed." She nodded, her tears mingling with his. "We still have a lot of work to do," she said, voice trembling. "But maybe we can heal together." And in that moment, with the last echoes of the piano still lingering in the air, they both realized that the road to redemption was long. The scars of betrayal would never fully vanish, but under the glow of a winter sunset filtering through the mansion's stained-glass windows, Anthony and Sophia embraced, choosing hope over despair. Despite the tragedies, the manipulations, and the heartbreak, love, deep, abiding love, found a way to take root once more. In the years that followed, the story of Anthony Lancaster and Sophia became something of a legend in Lexington Heights, a cautionary tale of how power and temptation can corrupt, but also a testament to the resilience of love. Anthony sold the penthouse he had once gifted Carla, donating most of the proceeds to Sophia's charities. He also quietly stepped back from his more ostentatious circles, refocusing his energy on rebuilding trust with Sophia and supporting projects that genuinely helped others. Sophia, though scarred by betrayal, found new strength in the adversity she had faced. She expanded her philanthropic work, founding a new foundation focused on supporting women who had suffered from infidelity and divorce. She also returned to her passion for music, performing intimate piano recitals at charity events. Over time, the foundation gained national recognition, and she found a renewed sense of purpose and identity. Their marriage, forever changed by the events that tore them apart, evolved into a different kind of bond, a cautious, deliberate commitment. They established clear boundaries, attended therapy regularly, and never shied away from the hard conversations about trust and transparency. For Anthony, every moment with Sophia was a chance to prove he was no longer the man who so callously cast her aside. For Sophia, each day was a step toward forgiving herself for ever believing she wasn't enough. Occasionally, in the hushed corners of society galas, one might still hear a whisper of Carla Moreno's name, an unconfirmed rumor of her latest escapade in some distant city, but the spectre of her hold on Anthony and Sophia had long dissipated. She became little more than a footnote in the unfolding story of two people who chose to fight for a love that, although battered, refused to die. People often asked Anthony how he managed to win Sophia back. In those moments he would smile ruefully and say, "I didn't win her. I was given grace beyond what I deserved, and that's something I'll never take for granted again." In the grand scheme of life, redemption is never guaranteed. It is earned through humility, sacrifice, and the unwavering dedication to repair what was broken. For Anthony Lancaster and his wife Sophia, redemption arrived like a fragile seed planted in scorched earth, fragile yet full of potential, waiting to be nurtured into something stronger and more beautiful than what had existed before. In the end, the cost was high and the journey arduous. But they found their way, proving that even amid the ashes of betrayal, love can spark anew. In the end, Anthony Lancaster learned the hard way that some mistakes can't be undone, and not every love story gets a second chance. He lost everything chasing a fantasy, only to realize that the real treasure had been beside him all along. But life has a way of teaching us lessons, whether we're ready for them or not. And for Anthony, redemption wasn't just about winning Sophia back. It was about proving every single day that he had changed. Was it enough? Only time would tell. If you enjoyed this story and want more drama, twists, and life-changing moments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's so much more to come, and you won't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button now and stay tuned for the next story.